Hello and welcome to the programme which looks at the Holy Land. I am Paul Calvert. Psalm 59 verse 1 from the New King James Bible says this: "Deliver me from my enemies, O my God. Defend me from those who rise up against me."
I'm with Elana Heideman from Israel Forever Foundation. Now, Israel has been fighting on many fronts, and just recently in Syria, we've seen fighting happening there. Elana, what's been happening in Syria, particularly with the Druze?
Well, what's happening in Syria is not necessarily a story that anyone around the world is very aware of, because to them, it seems just really far away, an outlier. Syria is a landscape that incorporates many different ethnic groups and religious groups under different forms of Islam and levels of power. Over the years, there have been many terrorist groups, guerrilla groups that have been active on the ground. And of course, after the fall of what was happening in Syria with the fall of Assad, you have this shift in the dynamic of what is taking place. In that space, a leader emerged, al-Julani, and he took upon himself to become the face of the new Syria. However, we quickly forget. We forget that there's a $10 million bounty was put on his head by the United States because this man was the leader of the terrorist activities on the ground. That could include Al-Qaeda, that can include ISIS, otherwise known as Daesh, that can include all of the tribal factions that are at war for power. And when they come together, they become even more powerful, taking over more land and dominating more of the society. Syria, of course, being a very large landscape. And they have the infiltration of the various coalitions that they have with other terror-supporting states like Iran. Unfortunately, the minorities living within Syria have become the primary target of the horrific massacres that are just beyond our imagination and unfortunately beyond the interest of many people. They're just minorities. As I said, it's Syria. It's far away. It's not connected to us. Of course, we have to juxtapose this with how the entire world seems to care about Gaza and Gazans, but they don't necessarily have any understanding of what's happening in this entire region in the Middle East and this reworking that is taking place, Syria being a good example of it. Unfortunately, these minorities are now becoming the target of these terrorist activities, and the scenes we are witnessing on live recordings are examples of October 7th, examples of things that took place during the Holocaust, and the Druze population is being genocided. It is being wiped out. Entire families, entire communities are being, in the Sueda area, are being completely wiped out and raped and mutilated and beheaded and brutalized. They were forcing young men to jump off of balconies or be shot, and many were both shot and then thrown from the balconies. We know of the stories of things they have done to babies and to women and to elderly, but we are watching point-blank murder as clearly as possible on these feeds, and the world is silent because it's Syria. It's just really far away. It really doesn't have anything to do with us. And so therefore, that disconnect has enabled a world of bystanderism, while the Druze population, and before them the Alawite population, on the very early days of this upheaval in Syria, where they were the first victims, and now the Druze. But I want to make specific mention also of the Christians, who have continuously been targeted under Muslim governments, but very often that is silenced. At the same time, we see Israel being accused of absolutely every horrific blood libel under the sun, and a blood libel it is. Most, if not all, of the accusations that are leveled against Israel are categorically proven to be untrue, to be fabrications fabrications, exaggerations, outright lies that are put together by the very well-oiled propaganda machine. Unfortunately, if there are no Jews, there is no news. And so therefore, the Druze population is falling victim every hour of every day that this has been taking place. The Druze population, you should know, is also lives and thrives within the state of Israel. In the Golan region is their largest population, and these communities are just beautiful gatherings of kind-hearted people who simply pursue peace with their faith and their lifestyle. They serve in the Israeli army, and unfortunately, we're victims also of the ongoing war that Hamas and Hezbollah are targeting on Israel. And we have the attack on Majd al-Shams and the 12 Druze children who were murdered by a missile while playing soccer. So in Israel, the Druze are a people we connect with, we identify with. And we have even the Druze in Syria who are begging that Israel will take on the Druze region of Syria as an Israeli territory. So what is happening in this place that is so far away, that does not really connect with most people in mainstream anywhere, a story is unfolding that everyone must be aware of, everybody must be speaking out against and learning from as we try to figure out how to navigate what's happening in the world today.
How have the Druze community in Israel responded to what's happening over the border? Are they wanting to go and help their brothers?
They right away, we had whole groups of Druze men who were going and joining the forces of defense against the al-Julani's terror networks, which includes, we want to mention, their local police. The civic police is actually involved. This is not just extremist groups, but it does also include, and we know because of the patches that they have on their uniforms that they're wearing. And so there's ISIS, and there are other groups, Al-Qaeda, that are represented there in these extremist tribal units. So the Israeli Druze have been crossing the border, and they have actually been working in conjunction with the IDF in order to do what they can to save as many lives as they can. Many Druze lives were saved by bringing them into Israel, into safe zones. Israel has also been helping by providing medical care and humanitarian aid. We are the only country at this time. I repeat, Israel is currently the only country providing aid to those being genocided by the extremist Muslims. What does that mean? We are in a 9-front war, and we are the only country providing help, providing humanitarian aid. Our financial reality here at 2 years of war is, collapsing itself, and yet we provide the aid. And so when the Druze of Israel go into Syria, they do so as Israelis and as proud Israelis, many of whom served in the army, as I mentioned. So they're really very actively involved in trying to save as many as they can.
So Israel really is responding to this and actually helping the Druze community in Syria, aren't they?
Absolutely. And the only one. And that's the thing that really is shocking, or maybe pathetically, it's not so shocking. I'm not sure. But it's a very precarious situation to see that all of the nations of the world continue to raise a voice against Israel, fighting its own defensive war and preventative. I'm trying to shift the language to encourage people to see that it's not just defensive in nature, but the wars that Israel is fighting are preventative so that we can make sure these things can't continue to happen if, for example, Hamas continues to rearm during any ceasefire, which we know now is what they have done since the last ceasefire. We know that because missiles continue to be fired from the Gaza region onto Israeli communities. Similarly, with the North, we have to tell the world and demand of the world that they recognize Israel's role in saving humanity. And the Druze are an important example of it. So yes, Israel is doing everything possible to be able to help in this horrific situation.
Christians being massacred as well in Syria?
Yes, as I mentioned, Christians have long been targeted for persecution under Muslim governments, and those types of persecutions now are getting increasing in awareness. Unfortunately, not enough. Many people do not realize the extent to which Christians are being targeted. Very recently, they went in and they just shot up a church on a Sunday. And then was it yesterday or 2 days ago, that one of the oldest churches even in Canada was burned to the ground. And of course, that libel then is, manipulated. Well, Israel fired a missile, Israel in its battles damaged one wall of a church, and the social media is filled with these images of this church that was apparently burned to the ground. Of course, Israel being experts in archaeology, we have all the evidence to show that what they're showing in pictures is actually a Byzantine church that is nowhere near the region that they're claiming was targeted. But the lie is the easiest to spread. When it comes to the persecution of Christians, that lie changes shape, meaning they need to be able to explain away their persecution of Christians by claiming that their victims are somehow wrong. I don't see that argument being effectively made. I just see that the world doesn't care. Because if the Christians in whatever, Syria or any region that is under Muslim dominance, they get attacked, then it disappears from the news. There's no continuation to the story of the persecution of Christians. And I believe that is because there are so many Christians in the world who don't feel persecution. There are Jews who are like, yeah, I know there's anti-Semitism, but I've never experienced it. It doesn't really affect me. It's not in my community. And so it's easier for them to not really grasp the significance of it, such as, for example, those who support jihadist leaders that are rising in American politics. I'm using that as an example with Mamdani in New York, who hands down is a jihadist. You have another in Minneapolis and another in Michigan. I mean, all throughout the United States, the people who say, well, the hatred, I don't really feel it. And so they don't internalize the messages that are spouting the hate and the calls for murder when these leaders make them. Instead, they use apologetics. They say, oh, that's okay, because I like their domestic agenda. They don't realize, of course, that at the bottom of the domestic agenda, underneath all of their taqiyya lies, is the desire for a dominance, a takeover, a caliphate where the entire world, and there are more and more interviews coming public about people being very outright, yes, the entire world will be Muslim. I think that when it comes to Christian persecution at the hands of Muslims, also you have many Christians who say, it doesn't affect me. I've never felt that. I don't think it's going to happen. There are too many Christians in the world for this to happen. And we need to help everyone wake up. Because as Holocaust survivors would always say, what are we waiting for? To have more people come home bloody at the end of the day before we do anything about it? So I think that the Christian world could be learning from Israel and seeking preventative measures. What can be done? Because it is only going to get worse. And anyone who does not believe so is living in denial and is unwilling to see that there is a certain writing on the wall, the dangers of extremist Islam, even moderate Muslims are afraid of, which is why you do not have anyone speaking out, not even from within the Muslim world. And that's what we all wish we could see. So at this point, we need to do everything possible to be garnering the type of voices and passion and empowerment that can bring those who want to see a stop to the suffering of Christians, as well as Jews and moderate Muslims. We want to see it all come to an end. Nobody has that answer, though. Nobody knows how to do it.
So we're seeing a genocide taking place in Syria right at the moment. So I imagine we're going to have marches on the streets in London. We're going to have students out there protesting and making encampments and saying that this genocide is taking place in Syria. Do you expect any of this to happen?
The Syrian attack has started. There has not been a single encampment. There has not been a single protest. There are no letters being written, reels being made. There is absolutely nothing happening from the voice of the world against this massacre. Why is that? What are people so afraid of? Or are they just so completely brainwashed and indifferent that, oh, well, for this, we don't need to protest? I think we have to recognize the protests that are anti-Israel, anti-Semitic, anti-Zionist claim, of course, under the auspices to be anti-war and anti-genocide. They are actually silent during an actual genocide. This shows us what their true agenda is. It also awakens some notes of reality, meaning who's funding and enabling all of those encampments? The same people who are funding the current massacres on Druze and Christians and other minorities in Arab countries. And I think that that has to be something people should be aware of. I don't think people will care. They don't care that there are no protests. We say that. Where's the outrage? And of course, I'm more interested not in just the public protests in the streets, but actually the private protests, the protests of people who say, I'm going to stand up and do it right where I am with the community that I'm a part of. I'm going to do something to use my voice, or I'm even going to distribute accurate information so that other people at least know better. We're not doing enough of that hands-on distribution of real information. And again, it's because people are a little too indifferent to the story. That is not, they're not Christian like me, or they're not, like me, these people, these Druze, especially. People really had to go look up, to be honest, Paul. They had to look up the word Druze in the dictionary, I think, when it started to hit the news. Nobody really knows about this beautiful, beautiful people and their wonderful culture. I personally grew up with relationships with friends in the north, in the Golan area, that I met through my Israeli uncle. And we used to go and pick the cherries with them in their beautiful cherry groves. I grew up with a respect for their culture. How do they make tea as opposed to how Bedouins make tea? I learned all these things because it was fascinating to me. And that was passed down to me from my parents, who, when they came to the land of Israel, also were fascinated with the idea of how do we meet those who live here on the ground, and what can we learn from them? So from the Druze in Israel, I've learned about that feeling of peoplehood that all Druze have. And that's something the Jewish people shares, the idea of the peoplehood. We are an Am. We are bloodline connected to one another, as well as spiritually, those who convert and get welcomed in, like Ruth in the Bible. I mean, we have so much in common, and I think that is one of the foundations for the peaceful relationship that is held between Jews and Druze. Encampments? Protests? Who's going to be their leader? Who's going to fund them? And what would their goal be? All of those answers basically lead to the fact that there will never be a protest because there's nobody to care about it. You know, Hitler himself had once said, nobody remembers the Armenian genocide. Now, that wasn't the word that was used. It was the massacre of the Armenians, because the term genocide was only coined by a survivor of the Holocaust after the Holocaust. A whole extermination, attempted extermination with directed intention at the elimination of a people. Nobody remembered for a long time the massacre of the Armenians. And it was actually Jewish activists who helped to make sure that the Armenian massacre would be remembered. The same continues to be true now for the Druze. And I believe actually for the persecution of Christians, you have Jewish leaders who are trying to bring awareness more than some of those who I know are active in the Christian world. I don't hear them talking about it at all. And so we have to ask ourselves those questions. Why is there no protest? Why is there no outrage? And then the last question is, how do we do something about it? I think people today are feeling tired. They don't know what to do. They don't know where to start. You know, they're busy trying to survive in their own way. So I think that we shouldn't be surprised. But if we want to see the protests, then get the groups together and make them happen.
What is your prayer for the Druze community at the moment?
I hope that Israel can continue to save as many lives as possible. I hope that the Druze people will be able to find some renewed hope in spite of the horrors. I hope that the world wakes up and learns about their name, that their name should be known in the annals of humanity and history, and they should be able to receive help so that they can sustain the needs of the survivors, because there are many, and we don't even know yet how much of the damage has been done and the trauma and how it could be healed. I hope that the Druze community receives increased attention and compassion and sympathy from around the world. You have noticed, by the way, you asked about encampments and protests. I also have not seen fundraising campaigns at all, other than I know of one that started by a community in the north here in Israel, and a Druze woman and an Israeli woman in America. I don't remember where they are. And they started a small campaign as well. But you don't see humanitarian aid being offered by the United Nations even. I mean, they're completely, corrupt and useless. But I hope for the Druze that we will come out of this and that they will continue to thrive in partnership with Israel and the Jewish people, and that we can just work together to make sure that they are not forgotten. As Elie Wiesel said about the Jewish victims in the Holocaust, and it's applicable to all victims of such massacres, to forget the dead is akin to killing them twice. Our job as human beings is to learn from these tragic experiences to make sure they are not forgotten, and that we can, when we say never again, that means no human being should ever again be targeted in this way. And when we see the really point blank murders and the beheadings and the holding up of heads by these terrorists with pride and with relish, we need to see a world awakened. Wake up. Where is the danger? Where is the evil? It's right in front of you. Stop believing the manipulations and rise together. And only when we rise together can we conquer this enemy before it becomes too late. I hope the Druze people will continue to be proud fighters so that they too can be a part of conquering and making sure that we put a stop to this.
What's your website for people who'd like to know more about the work that you do?
I am with Israel Forever, the Israel Forever Foundation, which was established in order to help Jews and friends of Jews around the world, friends of Israel around the world, to feel more confident, more educated, and more engaged by providing content and resources, recipes and games, and all sorts of insight and inspiration that you can use in the fabric of your life as a virtual citizen of Israel, standing together with the one nation that is doing the work for all of the world. We are fighting for humanity, and Israel Forever is geared to anyone in the world who wants to be able to feel more and do more. And so come and visit israelforever.org. Come and check us out on Instagram and YouTube and join our mailing list, because what you learn every day, what you learn every week can be a part of the change you make, not only for tomorrow, but for the years to come, and of course, forever. How will these experiences today be written in the history books? What will they write about this time period? We have to make sure we are dictating how the truth is told. And so Israel Forever is very much a part of that, and trying to encourage everyone in the world, whether you're an armchair activist or, a mom, grandparent, or a young parent trying to figure out how to raise your kids in this society, in this crazy world we're living in. Israel Forever I try to provide resources for you. And so I hope that you'll come and join our global community. The more we are in connection, the more change we can make in the world.
And well, Elana, thank you very much for sharing today.
Thank you so much for having me. And I wish everyone in the world a bit more strength and a bit more courage. I always say, be Israel strong. You have a lot you can learn from the Jewish people. That's how we've survived 3,000 years. And we're not going anywhere. So those who curse Israel will be cursed, and those who bless Israel will be blessed. So may all of your listeners come, join, be virtual citizens of Israel, and continue to carry the blessing. And you as well for your great work, Paul, in making sure that you get out the stories and the honesty of life here on the ground. And we're grateful to you. We're grateful to you and all of your listening community. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today. Pray that God will move by his mighty power in the Holy Land and bring his peace.